He has lived the kind of life that movies are made of, so it's no surprise that his story's been told on the big screen in an award-winning film directed by Milos Forman. He has been heralded as a staunch fighter for free speech and the First Amendment, run for political office, and authored a book on American history. But his critics are quick to point out that his fortunes were made on less savory businesses, pornography, strip clubs, and gambling under the brand name of Hustler. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with the outspoken and controversial publishing tycoon, Larry Flynt. What's your personal definition of obscene?
Obscenity is like the concept of sin. It defies definition. What might be to one is not to another.
Right.
I think Chief Justice William O. Douglas said it best when he said, "It's better left in the minds of man." Now, we know what pornography is, but so many people get confused on the two. But pornography is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. It's obscenity that's not protected, but nobody has been able to define obscenity. Potter Stewart once said, "I can't define it, but I know it when I see it."
Right.
So they come out with all kinds of terms like if it appeals to the prurient interest, you know, if it likes social, redeeming, moral, and political value, you know. So it becomes so subjective that you can't really get a definition.
But for you personally, are there things that cross the line?
You know, I think violence does. You know, you can publish a photograph on the front page of a newspaper, and it could be the most horrific photograph you've ever seen of a decapitated, mutilated body, and you might win a Pulitzer Prize as a result of this. But you put a picture on the same newspaper of two people making love, and you might go to jail.
Yeah.
So what does that say about a nation that condemns sex but condones violence?
How do you think we got to that point? It's not the same the world over.
Well, we got there largely because of the church. The church has had its hand on our crotch for over 2,000 years, and the government is exceedingly moving in that direction, figuring if they can control our pleasure center, they can control us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you've got all the guilt, you know, associated with the religious baggage, you know, and that's where all the sexual aberrations come from, you know. Most people that's raised in a healthy sexual environment usually have very healthy sexual attitudes.
But our country developed more puritanically than others. Why do you think that is? The church is in many places on the earth, but in the U.S. we have very specific reactions to these things.
Yeah. Well, we're hypocrites, you know, and Americans have this knee-jerk attitude towards sex. The Europeans are totally different. Like, they automatically assume that their politicians are having an affair. That's why they have these 3-hour lunches of a day. You know? I mean, but America can't cope with something that's simple. It's like Americans couldn't get their head around the Bill Clinton fiasco with Monica Lewinsky. You know, it's just it was more than the train wreck. You know, it was people just not being willing to accept that we're all frail as human beings.
Yeah.
We're not made out of granite and marble, you know, we're made out of flesh and blood. And I think that's where Americans have failed to come to grip with this. I don't have any problem with people having values. I just have a problem when they try to impose them on other people. And that's the big issue here in America, is it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. It's people out there wanting to impose, their narrow-minded, puritanical values on other people that don't want any part of it. And that don't mean because you don't go to church every Sunday that you're not a decent person. That don't mean that at all. But in the eyes of that minority that's very quick to criticize the rest of the country, it's a big issue.
Yeah. History puts you and Jerry Falwell together, and you folks did have a relationship of a sort for the remainder of his life from your court case. What do you think his responsibility was in moving our country toward this position of moral judgment?
Well, Jerry preached against me for 15 years in Old Time Gospel Hour, and then I spent another 5 years with him in court. And then I became friends with him after that. I probably know him as good as anybody does. And I think Jerry Falwell was just an old country preacher that wanted to make a lot of money. And he knew what he was selling, and he knew what I was selling, and that's why we got along very good.
But the moral majority, his whole organization, the impact it continues to have on our political system, what do you see there?
It's the flock, you can't, the hierarchy in the church, that's not the issue. The issue is the way that they manipulate their flock.
Take me all the way back. Your parents, were they surprised to see where your fortunes ended up coming from? Or as a young man, would they have known this is where you would be successful?
My mother and father were sharecroppers in eastern Kentucky. They didn't think much about what I did, and I don't think they ever really thought I'd amount to too much of anything. But I think I was largely motivated from having grown up in poverty, and I realized that there was a better world out there, and I was determined to find it, and I did.
Yeah. Was sex, pornography, strip clubs, was that something that you valued for what they were or for what they could give you?
For what they could give me. I didn't have any formal education, no formal training. Other than being in the Navy, I worked in a factory in Dayton, Ohio. So I was able to get into the bar business by saving a little money, and that's how it all started. And I opened hustler clubs around the state of Ohio, and the magazine was an outgrowth which started as a newsletter for the nightclub chain.
When did you realize you had struck a nerve with the American public? When did you realize you had something more?
I was at a book signing in Chicago, and this young man came up to me and shook my hand, and he says, "Mr. Flynt, I just want to thank you for helping me make it through puberty." And I thought to myself, my God, I've been trying to explain my mission to millions of people that I've never been able to. What bigger accolades could somebody possibly give me? And so I realized that millions of American teenagers, help come into life, through Hustler.
Yeah. Today's world of Hustler is much different than the world back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right on up through. And my curiosity is how you see with the changing technology, how publishing changes, that magazines on the stand aren't selling like they used to, that the internet has changed that. It's influenced all of our lives. From where you sit, what do you think of the impact that this technology has had?
Well, it's had a dramatic effect. In fact, it started in the 70s with Beta and VHS, and then eventually it became more and more pervasive, and I decided to start diversifying in the early 90s. And I put up the first website, which was extremely successful and still is today. But 20 years ago, 95% of my profits came from Hustler magazine. Today, only 5% come from Hustler. I have an e-commerce division. I have a broadcast division where we provide content to cable and satellite television all over the world. We go into 64 different countries. I have a casino operation in California, which is extremely successful.
I heard that's the most profitable of all your ventures.
You know, we have, well, broadcasters right pretty close to that, and we have an apparel division where we internationally are marketing the Hustler brand, and that's going good too. Everything we got is profitable. Even the magazine is profitable, but we know that 2 or 3 years from now, it's not going to be around. We've made the cuts necessary to try to, you know, keep it alive as long as we can, but at some point there come a time, you know, you got to let go.
When the magazine goes away, how will you feel?
I'll feel an emptiness and a sadness, but nothing can be done about it. You know, literally hundreds of magazines have closed in the last year, and so has a lot of major daily newspapers closed. You know, so it's affecting everybody. Technology.
As magazines and newspapers close, does it silence our voice, or with the internet, is there more opportunity to preach to folks?
Don't ever underestimate the internet. That's for sure. And I'm glad that we have it for all the problems it's brought with it, you know, because even though I'm always adamantly defend the First Amendment, there's some people out there blogging that should be in jail. You know? But it's a shame, you know, that they can freely, you know, lie and misrepresent the truth, and it really goes unchallenged. I think we'll see that get cleaned up a lot by as more and more sites become more competitive.
Yeah. Most people are familiar with your story, your journey through the movie, you know, People versus Larry Flynt. Is it an accurate portrayal of you? And what's your reaction to the film?
It's quite accurate. It's embarrassing because nobody in his right mind would act that crazy. But of course, I was being chased all over the country and always being prosecuted, and there was always a prosecuting attorney ready to accommodate me, and I just got tired of living in a courtroom, so finally I just went ballistic.
So were you, and I mean no disrespect with this question, but were you crazy or crazy like a fox during those times?
I didn't care. I mean, I've been shot and paralyzed. They're still trying to put me in jail. It's not enough. And I just didn't care. And I wanted to make a point, and I did. And look, the movie got 2 Academy Award nominations: Woody Harrelson for Best Actor, Milos Forman for Best Director. He also directed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on Amadeus. It was a really great movie. But any time they reduce your life to a couple hours on the silver screen, a lot gets left out. So they only focus on the most bizarre aspects of your life because they want it to be a commercial success.
Yeah. Is it hard for you to watch, though? There are some very touching and emotional parts in that film. When you see it, does it bring back the real stories for you, or can you see it as just the film?
It's a little painful. There's a documentary out about me called The Right to Be Left Alone. It's kind of painful to watch, too. It is, because I tend to take things more personal than what I should.
Yeah. Do you have regrets for the way you did things?
The only regret I have is when I went on trial in Lawrenceville, Georgia. I would have worn a bulletproof vest. I probably wouldn't be in this wheelchair now. Other than that, I don't have any regrets. I actually people ask me what it's like to be like in a wheelchair. I tell them, you know, if no one brings it up, I wouldn't even think about it because I never spend time dwelling on something I can't do anything about. And that served me well in my life by not feeling sorry for myself and just doing my thing.
In going along with what you're just saying there, I'm curious though, when someone tries to take your life, I mean, people can say they don't like you, but it's much different than pointing a gun at you and shooting. How does your life change after that? What happens to you in your approach of the world around you, in your trust in people? What changes when someone tries to shoot you?
You know, stuff happens. I never looked at it as who shot me, but what shot me. The mentality of someone that wants to shoot you because they disagree with your politics or your point of view. I was shot by a white racist who was upset over a black and white photo feature that we published in the magazine, you know. So those racists are really blinded with their hatred, you know, and I'm not the only guy they tried to kill or did kill, you know.
Yeah. Does it change your reaction to how you do things after the point? Knowing that this is what set them off, do you find yourself either shying away or doing even more? Is there any kind of reaction to it?
I can never live my life in a cocoon, so to speak. You know, I mean, I go where I want to do, and I do what I want to do. And I don't think about it.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit here now and go toward the First Amendment and your issues with the First Amendment and what it means to you. When you think about protected speech, and you've already said some bloggers shouldn't be blogging what they're blogging, do you believe all speech should be protected ultimately?
Absolutely. We had a famous justice that said, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. I think you can. If someone's hurt as a result of you doing that, that's a crime they're prosecuted for. But you can't tell them they can't say something before they do it. That's prior restraint, which is the ugliest form of censorship of all. And, you know, freedom of speech is not the freedom for the thought we love. It's the freedom for the thought we hate the most. You see, everybody has their own vision of what should be protected by the First Amendment. But then when you start asking them questions about hate speech, flag burning, you know, pornography, next thing you know, you don't have 98% approval, you've got 50% or less. Yeah. So people will always differ because of their own personal beliefs on what kind of protection should be afforded by the First Amendment. That's why it's so critically important that it be protected at every stage. You know, like Janis Joplin 40 years ago, sang the lyrics, freedom just another word for nothing left to lose. That sentiment is more prevalent today than it's ever been before. And people must understand that we pay a price to live in a free society, and that price is toleration. We have to tolerate things that we don't necessarily like in order to be free, like Fox News. But you know, you had those two pastors, and one was protesting the funerals of the soldiers coming home from burial, and then the other one wanted to burn the Koran and all this. And everybody was all up in arms about the issue of what do we do, you know. Even law enforcement was starting to panic as well as a lot of regular citizens. We can't let the First Amendment be hijacked by a couple of idiots like that. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't overreact and throw away a freedom that's the most important of anyone that's in the Constitution. And even though I'm very unhappy with this present Supreme Court, what they have done is they've done a pretty good job protecting the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm. When did it stop being Larry Flynt protecting what was his interests, and it became Larry Flynt, First Amendment crusader? When did that shift? When did you realize you were on a bigger mission?
I think I had stand in a courtroom in Cincinnati in 1977 and listened to a judge sentence me to 25 years in prison before I realized that freedom of expression was something that could no longer be taken for granted. And at that time, I was already caught up in the fight for the First Amendment. And I fought that battle as hard as I could by speaking for no honorarium on every college campus in America for years, to try and press home with the kids, how important this was, and if they were seeking to go into law, how important that there's certain principles, that they've got to uphold.
Yeah. You've also authored a book about our nation and sex, One Nation Under Sex.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, the lessons that you took from that book and what you want people to see when they read it.
Well, when I decided to do the book, I wanted to see if there were sex scandals at the founding of our country, just like they are in our political culture today. And surprisingly, they were there. Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, and those guys were always campaigning against one another and throwing everything they had at each other, and the press was eating it up, just like they are today. And of course, later on, we went through a period, and it was that way for about a century. Then, when the Cold War came around, the press somehow felt that they should protect the president. And they protected Roosevelt, Kennedy, and, really Wilson, Harding, all of them. And after the Cold War, when Bush Sr. and Clinton came along, everybody was fair game once again. I don't know where it goes from the point of where it is now. I often get accused of exposing people's sex lives just for the sake of doing it. But that's not the reason. It's the hypocrisy that I expose, because I think hypocrisy is the greatest threat that democracy has. Mm-hmm. And besides, I want to affect some political change. I've only got one vote, so if I can create that revolving door in Washington, and over the years I've got rid of a few dozen of them, So.
Is it fair for you to have the amount of impact you have just because you publish a magazine, just because you're rich? Should you have this place to speak out, your bully pulpit?
I think so, because I created it myself, and I paid the price. Napoleon was once asked how he got his crown, and he said, I was walking down the street and I saw it in the gutter and I reached down and picked it up. So I just came back from Philadelphia last week, and then Constitution Center, where the Constitution was drafted, they have an electronic tree in there with 100 people that most affected, protected or preserved the Constitution over the years, and my name was there. And this is not something that the senator selects. These are names that are selected by scholars, and I was right there with Catherine Graham of the Washington Post and Frederick Douglass and on and on. So it's kind of a humbling kind of experience. And I noticed in reading, of each one of the individuals they have on the tree, they have a bio. they had the Forward case, my obscenity cases, and all that, and they had one that I had like almost forgot about. At the start of the Iraq War, when we invaded Iraq, they wouldn't let the press go along. So I sued Rumsfeld in federal court in Washington, D.C., saying that we had a First Amendment right to cover the war. So the judge in the District of Columbia told the U.S. attorney, says, I'm ruling that Mr. Flynt has a constitutional right to cover the war. And so they went and met with Rumsfeld and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and everybody, and that's when they come up with the embedding of the troops. So I'm proud to say that we brought that about, and I think that was a very important decision. So the government takes me quite serious when I file a suit.
Well, we do too. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Larry Flynt.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of Interviews, please visit HoustonPBS.org.